Good afternoon, and welcome to Many Paths, Many Visions, brought to you by the Labyrinth Society and with your host, Christiana Brinton. Today, I have as my guest Reverend Warren Lynn, a longtime member of the Labyrinth Society, who is a Christian Church DOC minister, a Veritas Advanced Certified Labyrinth Facilitator, and a prolific digital virtual map maker. Excuse me. If you're joining us today on the GoToMeeting session, and I don't see anybody else on yet, but if you choose to join at any time, and you can do so at any time from the invitation that was on Facebook, both on the Facebook page, the Labyrinth Society Facebook page, and in the global group, and also on the Labyrinth Society media area on the labyrinthsociety.org website. So if you choose to come in, we are going to have a question and answer period during the last 15 minutes, but you can join us at any time. And if you do, you want to mute your mic by clicking on the microphone icon on the upper left of the GoToMeeting control panel that will appear on your computer screen once you log in. If you call in, you won't see this, of course. And I do not have I'm not showing my computer screen. This is just an audio session. So please, if you just call in, just keep quiet until the last 15 minutes, and then I'll open the recording the episode up to guests, to inquiries. So, and then you can unmute yourselves. If you are on your computers, you can unmute yourself and ask questions during the Q&A session at the end of the interview. This episode is entitled Mapping Labyrinths, One Man's Passion. My guest, Reverend Warren Lynn, has become a well-known figure at Labyrinth Society gatherings. Using his drone camera and his stash of other still cameras, he has all shapes and sizes, but his drone camera, he takes photos of the outdoor labyrinths and festivities, and he always is willing to pitch in to erect temporary labyrinths wherever they're needed. But not many people know that as an extension of his passion to provide his communities with information that will help them lead more spiritual lives, he's created a North American online virtual labyrinth map that shows state by state in the USA and province by province in Canada a plethora of helpful labyrinth information for residents and travelers. This map can be found on his website, www.wellfedspirit.org/labyrinths. So greetings, Warren. Welcome to Many Paths, Many Visions. Thank you for joining me today.
Good afternoon. Thanks for inviting me.
So let's talk about let's get some background to this map making endeavor of yours, extension of your creativity. Was the impetus for creating these maps in part due to the existence of the Worldwide Labyrinth Locator?
Yeah, I really think so. The Worldwide Labyrinth Locator was a great inspiration behind the mapping project. That locator has been one of my primary go-to resources when I'm curious about labyrinths in a particular area, or when I hear about a labyrinth someplace and want to know more about it. It's such an amazing tool, but because I'm a fairly visual person cognitively, the one thing the Labyrinth Locator didn't provide for me was a visual interface to actually see on a map the location of a labyrinth or locations of multiple labyrinths at the same time in a particular area. Like I said, I'm one of those people who tends to be fairly visual, and I've always been challenged to find places only by street names or the name of a location that someone gives me. I kind of need a bigger visual context to help navigate in this world. So the idea came to develop such a visual interface that did not take away from or compete with the Worldwide Labyrinth Locator, but rather was complementary to that amazing resource. Oh, go ahead.
Had you ever done anything like this before? Had you ever done any virtual maps before on your website for any other purpose or any other area?
No, not really, not
Mm.
any kind of mapping project. And to be honest, I'm sure there are others out there who could do a much better job than I'm doing, especially if they have coding skills, which I really don't.
Mm.
Um, but the project came as part of my larger passion to archive and make available spiritual practice resources through the Well-Fed Spirit website. And this mapping project is really just one tiny bit of that larger work.
Yes, I've looked at your website, and it really is chock full of all sorts of research, referral, URL places, links, places to go for all types of help. And it's a great resource because when you have you get to sometimes you get to a point in your life and you think, I need help in this area, or this is what's coming up for me now, but I don't even know where to start. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to access. I don't know what will feel right to me. And this, I think what you've done here, and I actually am on your website now, is provide a lot of forks in the roads for people, a lot of paths they can take to to search and figure out and develop their own way of handling whatever it is that they need to handle in their lives. It's a really great resource. And I frankly, even though I knew about you and knew about the Labyrinth, I hadn't really taken the time to explore all the different pages that you have on your website. And it's a big help. I don't know, is this just for your area where you live? Or, I mean, I know the Labyrinth map isn't, but are these other
Yeah.
referrals for in general? Can they be applied? Because I haven't gone into every single link.
Yeah.
So,
No, it's the site really, it comes out of my own vocational work to support my community,
mm,
but I wanted it to be a site like the Labyrinth map. I want it to be a site that anyone and everyone can use.
mm,
One of the things you'll find is that I try to be real intentional with resources, whether in Well-Fed Spirit or on the map itself, that I'm offering um, diverse possibilities. I come out of a tradition that really values that, and there's not really one way of thinking or one specific creedal theology or anything like that. And so we have people all over the map, if you will.
mm,
And my goal was to provide this vast variety of resources that invited people in to a positive experience of whatever tool or resource they were having to look at. Because quite frankly, my experience was just like yours, that when I began this work a lot of years ago, my tradition didn't have this one place you could go to try and begin figuring these things out. And so that's sort of the impetus to provide that for colleagues, but also provide it for everybody out there.
mm.
So try to be real non-sectarian, try to avoid any resources or any links that say our way is the only way. And you'll find that expressed in the map as well as the other resources on Well-Fed Spirit.
Mm. And so you say you're a visual person. You love taking photographs. You love, you've invested a lot of time and money in all the equipment that you have. So did that play into this interest in virtual maps as well? I mean, because you had this background. How long have you been taking photos and really using your love of photography and to to expand your website or to provide, I mean, because you certainly have wonderful photos from you from the past gatherings. So,
Thanks. I I've been a photographer for most of my life.
okay.
I got my first very own SLR as a high school graduation gift from my folks. But in high school I had been, that was in the age of dark rooms and things like that, and had done a lot of that work, and then in college continued that work, and finally we all got to move into this democratized age of digital photography where, you don't have to worry about how much money you spend on film. And as my own draw to spiritual practice and to vocational call within a spiritual tradition evolved and developed, photography kind of just organically fit into that because I was so familiar with the practice.
Okay.
But
So I'm gonna ask you a little bit more about the photography right now. So
mhm.
when you take pictures, because this sort of leads into the virtual map thing. So when you take photographs, uh do you play with them in any software program?
um,
Do you tend to do that, or do you make them into something more than what they were from the initial photo or the initial image, or is this something?
that's Yeah, that's all. Sorry, that's always a balance for me.
Okay.
Um, I'm not a photographer in the way that I'm simply a news reporter,
Mhm.
but I'm also not the kind of photographer like some of these amazing artists out there who will begin to significantly alter their photographs in ways that they become something more and less literal than they started out to be. I tend to do quite a bit of editing, but it tends to be fairly subtle to try and bring out what it was that I saw with my eyes, but maybe the camera wasn't able to capture because of the natural setting, because of the speed of what was happening, because of my lack of putting settings correctly or whatever. And so I will edit kind of like I would when I was back using darkrooms in a very similar way. And I tend to use Photoshop to do that, but there are a variety of tools that can be used out there.
Hmm. Um, okay, so let's go back to these maps.
Okay.
So you decided to, what was the first thing that you thought about when you said, I really am a visual person. I really need to see this visually.
Mhm.
Explain, like right from the beginning, what was your thought process and how did you create parameters and then the steps that had you then continue, since you said you never had done this before.
Mhm. Um, I'm familiar enough with computers and use computers that rely heavily on a visual interface, and so that is something I'm completely comfortable with. And as long as I had a computer program or software that would allow me to do that, that piece was already in place. But as I began to consider what such a tool like the Labyrinth map might look like, I also decided pretty early on to not show every labyrinth that is out there in the world. That's really the primary, at least in my mind, gift of the Worldwide Labyrinth Locator is you can go up and look by all sorts of parameters, ephemeral labyrinths, canvas, portable labyrinths, etc. But I decided that the labyrinths that I wanted on the map, because of how I wanted to use the map and felt like the map would be helpful to be used, was that one, they would be permanent labyrinths. And two, that they were labyrinths that were available for use by the public in some way. Even if somebody needed to get permission first to use it, they were there and available. So the map does not show and never has shown all the labyrinths in North America,
Mm.
but rather the labyrinths a person driving through town on any particular day can show up and use.
Mm.
So one of the built-in intentions of this mapping project, because of its limit in scope, was to actually support the Worldwide Labyrinth Locator. One of my kind of initial values was that I wanted the Labyrinth map to actually increase traffic to the Worldwide Labyrinth locator site by directing people with links from the map to the Worldwide Labyrinth locator. So whenever possible, the links on the map to other information about a particular labyrinth would send people to the actual listings about that labyrinth on the Labyrinth locator. And then on each page, I also maintain a link right on the kind of top level of the map to the Labyrinth locator itself. I think some people were initially concerned, and I think rightly so, that early on, as this began to develop and people learned about it, I might be trying to duplicate or replace the Labyrinth locator. But that was exactly what I did not want to do. I wanted to support that amazing tool and actually promote its use, but just by adding one more small piece to the puzzle, which was this visual interface. So how did that all happen? I will say it's evolved over time. What I had initially envisioned has changed. And it is a work in progress even still. It also is helpful for folks to know that that mapping project had initially been completed for every Canadian province and US state. And at that point, when that happened, it was just a matter of sort of maintaining the map and occasionally adding links as other people suggested, or as I became aware of a new labyrinth out there, and updating links if somebody changed the address to their website that I was linking to. But the software I was using as the foundation for the map ceased to be supported by the company that sold it. Which was fine for a while, but then the computer operating systems we work with and the internet systems we browse with were updated time and again, and yet the program I was using was no longer being updated to take into account those other kinds of evolutions. Eventually, I discovered that any change I made to this map resulted actually in more and more glitches. For instance, at a certain point in all this, anytime I would update even just one thing, one link for a particular state map, every link on that particular map page would suddenly become transparent. They'd still be there. You could click on them, but you couldn't see them at all. And it just began to devolve even more and got to the point where the map wasn't helpful. And so I had to figure out whether I start over or whether I just kind of let go and this is no longer a time for this map project. But I kept getting contacts from people who love to use it. So I decided to start over, and I sort of felt like Sisyphus rolling the rock up the hill again. But the second time I was rolling this rock back up the hill to recreate the site, that rock had become larger. There were many more links on the map than what I had originally started with. So the first step there was to research and find a new platform for the map, which I did. Again, something that didn't have to require extensive coding experience, and was visually oriented, because that's how I tend to work with these things. And I've slowly began migrating the site over. It's been a bit more labor intensive than I had hoped, and to be honest, not all states or provinces are moved over even yet. But I'm working on it as I can, and I am more than happy for someone to contact me and prod me to do their area next, because that's one I haven't gotten to. For instance, I'm really hoping to get the Minnesota maps next as the progression, because Lisa Moriarty keeps building more labyrinths up there, and I'm excited to see which labyrinths weren't on the first incarnation of these maps. Another challenge this second time around is, in fact, that I'm creating maps with many more labyrinths on them than when that project first started many years ago. And so I'm having to figure out how to fit in more links on each map. So that's something I'm having to work on, and it's resulted in me actually having to add more urban area maps, because a place that maybe just had one labyrinth that I could note on a state map level Now that community has 5, 6 or more labyrinths, and so I have to create a map for that city so that we can visually see where they are on the map. But basically, in all of that, the steps to create the site was that one, I had to create a web page for each state, and then those separate pages for each major metropolitan area in the state for which there was a higher density of labyrinth locations. I needed to know where the labyrinths were, and in some cases I had to create a third level of sub-level maps within a larger urban area map because there were so many labyrinths in that area. The San Francisco area is one example of that. And then I had to research what labyrinths were in each state beyond just the hunch that there were a lot here or less here. And I will say that the Worldwide Labyrinth Locator is one of my primary sources for initial research in that case. But I've also got pretty good at knowing which words to use for online searching of information and things like that. And then I also pay attention to the information regarding whether the labyrinth is available to use by the public, which is, again, one of my prerequisites for a labyrinth getting onto the map in the first place. And then the next step is to add those links for each of these publicly available permanent labyrinths out there. I like to add a first link to a decent Google Maps satellite view, and at least one other link to either the Worldwide Labyrinth Locator listing for that specific labyrinth, or a link to other online information about the labyrinth that is out there as available. For instance, one of the things I found is there are quite a few churches out there of all sorts of various denominations and traditions that don't know about the Worldwide Labyrinth Locator, but may have really good information for their labyrinth on their own website. And so I'll link to those. But I also take those opportunities to try and contact folks in those kind of situations and let them know about the Worldwide Labyrinth Locator and encourage them to actually post their labyrinth there. I won't go as far as to list it for themselves. That feels like I'm sort of stepping on toes there, but I will encourage them to make use of the Worldwide Labyrinth Locator by adding a listing.
Okay.
Let's
So
see.
okay, so now I have some questions. So let's go back. So you have a specific software program that you use. Is this how you created the legend, like the one that you've done for the gathering this year? You have a legend. You have a purple dot and pink dots and green dots and yellow red stars and red shaded areas. So this kind of legend for each one of your maps, was this part of the software program, or did you have to create this separately?
Oh, I created it separately. The program allows you to create shapes and text boxes and things like that, and put them pretty much wherever you want on the page. And so, yeah, that was part of my work, was to figure out, okay, what would the map look like? What would the links look like? What would the legend be? So for instance, one of the things you will notice on the TLS or Labyrinth Society map this year is we had talked about, there are going to be a bunch of labyrinths available in the Chicagoland area, but maybe there are some labyrinths we really want to highly encourage folks to see over others because of their quality or their context or their location. And so I actually created an additional kind of symbol, a little, I think it's a red and yellow star, to denote that those are particularly recommended labyrinths to go visit. Yeah. So yeah, that's all part of me figuring out, okay, what do I want it to look like? And ultimately I could have made it look different. I didn't want it to be so complex that folks weren't comfortable using it, but I also wanted to give some color and attractiveness to it, and it just came down to how I decided to do that.
And so how do you? So just FYI, this the one that you made as a gift to the the Labyrinth Society this year for the 20th anniversary gathering this year. Thank you so much. And you know, from the board to you, thank you so much, Warren. Um, but um, now what was I going to ask you? See, now I've forgotten what I was going to ask you. But I think it was, what had you decide so what has you decide, well, okay, what's the cutoff? So you say, okay, there's 10 labyrinths in this immediate area. So I need another red square because I need to go in deeper. Like I need to create another sub page. What are the parameters that you choose? Or or is it just like, it just depends on the area? Or do you have a specific, okay, if this is a cutoff, if there's 20 labyrinths in this area, I'm going to do a sub page just for this area, something like that.
Yeah. When it comes to those urban areas, I mean, the state map is pretty much given. I want a map that has the whole state on it.
Mm-hmm.
But then if there's an area within that state map, which is any one area on there is pretty small within the state map itself. If there's a particular area on there that I couldn't possibly get the 5 dots for the labyrinths that are in that location, then I've got to create a subpage for that area. Those subpages tend to represent larger metropolitan areas or whole cities. And when I'm creating the map for that page, one of the things I look at is where are all the labyrinths in that area. For instance, if there's a labyrinth just on the outside edge of that larger town, I might increase the radius of that map a little bit so that labyrinth link can be on the urban map or the city map rather than the state map. If there's just 2 or 3 and they're all downtown, I might confine that map even more so that it's easier to see within that city map the streets of where those labyrinths are located. It really varies, and it's contextual to how many labyrinths are in that particular area.
Okay.
There are some times when I've had to go back and add another layer secondarily because more labyrinths crop up, and now that urban area map that I created doesn't work anymore, and so we'll just update it as we need to do that.
But you can't tell when you go onto your website, can you tell which are the old maps, what's the old software and which is the new? I mean, I didn't notice any difference between the maps, and I looked at a bunch of them.
Yeah, what you will see now
Mm-hmm.
is a state page, for instance, that said this one is in progress of being updated, and there aren't any links to labyrinths.
Okay.
That's what you'll see. So if you live in a particular state and you pull up your state and you go, oh, there's a little sign that says this is in progress, and there are no links on this map. Well, if you want me to get that done sooner rather than later, that's when people start bugging me and going, please do my map next. And I'm happy to do that. So,
okay. Can I ask you, Warren, are you typing when you're, because I don't know, there's a noise that's happening, and I just, for the sake of everybody being able to hear really clearly, I was just wondering if you were typing or doing anything on your end, because
nope.
Okay, then it's in the GoToMeeting, and I apologize, everyone, people who are listening. It's part of the recording. You're just going to have, it's part of the patina, so just enjoy it anyway. So there you go. So let's get back to the legend that you have here. You don't just have, so for instance, for the gathering map, and this is what I meant to say to everybody, it is not up. The links are not up on the gathering website page, the TLS gathering website page yet. It is coming in. We wanted to wait until after the 4th of July holiday. So be prepared. It's all ready to go. Warren's done a beautiful job, and we will have a JPEG of the JPEG is actually of the greater Chicago, Illinois, the submap. We'll have a JPEG that will then link directly to Warren's website. So you can use this 20th anniversary gathering virtual map to plan your visit to the gathering this year. Because, and we'll go into this more, but I just wanted everybody to know it is ready to go. We are just proofreading it and proofing it and making sure everything worked. And so we are planning to, TLS is planning to publicize it and bring it up live with links from the TLS website after the 4th of July holiday. So stay tuned. So, but let's talk some more about the legend here. So you have, for instance, for the gathering map, you have purple dots for labyrinth locations, and those are the geotag maps. Those are from Google mapping, right?
Yes, yes.
The pink dot, the little pink dots are more labyrinth information about that particular place or site.
Yeah, and they tend to be overlapped by the purple dot. So you'll know that pink dot of information is about the location that it sort of underlaps the purple dot, and you simply access that by clicking on the particular dot with your cursor.
Okay. Then you have then you have yellow red stars for the especially recommended labyrinth, which you just talked about. And then the red shaded areas are the more detailed area maps, which we just talked about. But let's talk about the green dots. What had you decide to also list all of now these are just Veritas certified facilitators, or they are facilitators who have been certified through other programs?
They are what I guess the best way. Initially, they're Veritas trained facilitators, because that's, Veritas was one of the only organizations out there training and certifying. That was sort of their mission. I would say now that those dots are links to information about trained labyrinth facilitators. So not just anyone who walks labyrinths but somebody who has a work that is that they have experience and training to lead other people in the practice of labyrinths. Where that came in was that there were a lot of trained facilitators out there, and at this point, whether Veritas or whether trained through somebody else, but if, somebody who got some intentional training, who had information out there, and people were looking for those folks to lead events or to help them in their own personal work or whatever. And so the idea was that, well, let's create links for facilitators and link them on the map over the general geographic area, not specifically where they live for a variety of reasons, including safety, but over a general area of where they live and where they do their work, so folks can access those people and information of those people from the map. Now, some facilitators already have wonderful labyrinth pages, and we simply are wonderful facilitator pages of their own, and so we simply link to those. But a lot of facilitators don't have any web presence at all. And so part of this idea was, well, I'll offer to create simple web pages, no cost to a person who wants one, but a very simple, nothing elaborate, because if you get that point, then you really need to be working on your own stuff or get somebody, more professional and pay them to do it. But a simple, attractive page that gives you kind of a synopsis of what their work is, what their training is, what any specializations that they have, et cetera, maybe a picture of the facilitator, and a variety of things like that. So I developed sort of a template for what that simple page would look like. And then I just put the offer out. If you have web presence already and you want to be linked on the map, let me know. If you don't have web presence but would like a little web page, I'm happy to create that. But I don't put those on the map unless a facilitator specifically requests for that to happen. There are a whole lot of reasons, good reasons, why somebody might not want that kind of information to be on a map and available. And I want to be real sensitive to that. So that's, while I'll go out and look for labyrinths that clearly communicate they're open to the public, I'm not going to make that assumption about facilitators who are out there doing work. And I will wait for them to request it, and then I'll work with them to make sure that happens. But that's what that green dot is.
And how do the facilitators know about you? Through Veritas, through the facilitator website area and Veritas, and just by word of mouth, or?
But yes, both of those, primarily through Veritas, because that's the connection I knew about. But sometimes by word of mouth too. And we've arranged with Veritas so that it's a service I provide once somebody gets training. They let them know that here's this service that's out there if you want it. So they have a way to communicate that with their folks. But I've provided that for a few others too, who just through word of mouth learned it. It's not like we're trying to keep a secret or anything like that. It's more I don't know how else to get a hold of people. So
okay. Well, this certainly seems like this aspect of it, which I had no idea that this was the case. I love doing. I have to say, I love hosting these podcasts because I find out stuff like this that I had. When you just go on somebody's website, no matter how much information is there, you don't have this. You don't get this kind of background. You just don't know. So, and I think it's very much in alignment with your passion to provide your communities with information to lead more spiritual lives. I mean, it's so much goes hand in hand with that. So how many, by your estimation, I don't know how many years you've been doing this, but how many basic websites have you provided for facilitators across North America, do you think?
um, I really don't know. I do it when I get asked, and
Yeah.
I will say probably not a lot, less than a couple dozen. You'd have to go through the map and really count those green dots,
Okay. Yeah.
and then weed out the ones that I'm simply linking to somebody else's site. But probably a couple dozen. It's not a service that gets used a lot. Um, it, it's just one of those things that's out there, and I just do for folks who want it to be done. But I'm not out there full time trying to sell it either. It's not I haven't commoditized it, or it's not an effort to make money. It's just where I can, I make it known. If this would be helpful to you, I'm more than happy to create a page. You need to know that there's some limitations to it, but it will be attractive, and it's something that you, as a facilitator or a trained leader using Labyrinths, can then direct people to through your own material, because there will be an actual web address for that page, and they can use that or create a smaller URL, and then direct people to use it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And what about, so you have the facilitators on there. And this brings up, because for me, when I was living in the Pacific Northwest and very active with the Labyrinth community out there, one of the things we found was that people were saying, listen, I want to put a Labyrinth, and it was usually in some type of government facility or educational or bureaucratic, where they had to have an official, quote unquote, certified, quote unquote, person come and speak to this group in order to get it approved, in order to get funding through the hospital or the church, or not the church, but the hospital or the town, for the town park area, or or for a school, or even for a university, that they had to have somebody who had some moniker, because that's the way their system works,
Sure.
in order to get funding. And I always thought that this would be a great way to, for the regional reps. And at the time, I was the regional rep for Veritas out there, but we didn't really have anything coordinated. I'm wondering if at some point, the regional reps program with TLS is being reinvigorated through the membership program through Janice Lewis. And I'm wondering if that might also be, not that you need more to do, Warren, no, for sure, but it's another idea to add the regional reps to these maps so that people, again, it's the same thing. So you're being of service, giving information out about how to get connected in your local community so that you can get, I mean, basically, we're all wanting more labyrinths to be built. That is the
Yeah.
bottom line. You know, we want people to use labyrinths. We want more labyrinths to be built. We want people to have more access. So it's great. It's just such an interesting, because I thought of this years ago, but then it didn't go anywhere because the regional reps program in both organizations wasn't really happening at the time. But now it is. Now it is happening. So it's something to think about. It's something to think about in terms of providing this kind of service uh,
Yeah.
for people who are going to be in the area, who are visiting, or who are residents and want something built, really, really want something built in their town park or their hospital, their local hospital, wherever, or even in their prison system. Um,
Hmm.
and to be able to get in touch with the regional reps from either organization in that area is also another idea. Um, and another little dot for your
Sure. That actually would be really easy to do. I think that probably would work best if it was a collegial proposal from the representatives group to say, hey, we'd like to do this. And then we begin a conversation about what it would look like, whether that's an individual link to a particular rep in your area, or each map has a link to the same page that lists who the regional reps are throughout North America, and how to get a hold of them. That's an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
And again, I think it would work best so I don't step on toes, and so I don't create something that folks have really good reason to say, no, we don't need that. But for them to say, hey, would you be interested? This is what we had in mind. I think that's a great conversation to have, and I'd be more than happy to include it on the maps. You will notice if you look, for instance, at, I believe it's the Oregon map. There's a link there to the I can't remember their exact name, but the Labyrinth Northwest Network. So I when I know about those, I also try to say, hey, for this map, here are a group of people in this geographical region who are doing this kind of work. And so I linked to direct people to their site to try and, again, use the sort of mission of this labyrinth to drive people to other places on the web and increase traffic in those locations for the sake of this greater work of labyrinth stuff.
It's a great idea, and it's such an interesting and evolving type of process, especially not only, well, here, I mean, how, when you started, how often did you have to update each state or province, and how often do you have to do that now? And I'm sure it's much more frequently now. Or do you try to really limit yourself to a certain number of hours every month, or you just will always be doing it?
I probably will always be doing it as long as I have energy to do it. I tend to be real careful to not use time that I don't have during work. And yet, if there's an ebb and flow and a time where I can maybe put up one of those maps in an afternoon, and the workload is a little bit low, I'll do that. Most often, it's sitting at home in front of the TV watching a television show or listening to a podcast or something like that, or a music show on NPR, and I'll just be sitting there, and it becomes this sort of mindful, kind of engaging, quiet practice, but not so distractive that I can't also pay attention to that other thing that I'm listening to or watching. So it's very much a part-time, for the most part on my own time, kind of effort. That just because I enjoy it and I'm a little bit passionate about it. And it's, even computer work. depending upon how you approach it, can be a contemplative endeavor. And so that's kind of how I'm approaching this. And like I said, not all the maps are done because I can't just take a whole bunch of time and several weeks and knock it out. And so I'm working on it as I can, and hopefully I'll get to it. And I hope nobody takes offense if their state isn't populated yet. It's not intentional. Um,
Well, so you also created a virtual world map.
yep.
So all the locations all over the world. I mean, there's large sections that don't show any labyrinths, Russia for one, but um, at least Western Russia, or yeah, Eastern Russia. I always get that confused when I'm looking at the map of the world map. Which way is east, which way is west. But the locations that you put on this world map, are they all from the Worldwide Labyrinth Locator, or do you receive tips about suggested labyrinth and then you got to do more research? Do you go by the Google Maps first, or the latitude and longitude? How do you do it on a world scale?
Um, yes to some of all of that.
Okay.
That probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but
No, that's okay.
um,
You can get,
yeah.
I,
It,
I
it,
rambled. Sorry.
no, that's fine. Admittedly, that world map page is really, really limited in scope.
Yeah.
And I don't really have much time or availability or even wisdom and knowledge to create such a map beyond North America. But I wanted to display some way of indicating what to me are what I would consider significant labyrinths in other global areas. Now, it was sort of an attempt to convey in a simple and symbolic way that labyrinths are found everywhere. And so the few labyrinths that are listed on that world page came from my own direct experience with them, or tips from others, also Worldwide Labyrinth Locator. And each of them also required some additional research to figure things out. Ultimately, though, I really am not likely to do much more with that world map. But if my map inspires someone else or several others to create similar mapping projects for their own countries or continents, I think that would be fun. And I would also be more than happy to share my experience to help them accomplish that. But I really see any labyrinth maps that might happen in the future in other places in the world as coming out of the passion of other people. And they would, they don't need it at all by any means, but certainly they would have my blessing and encouragement to create that, because I think it would be just really fun to have some kind of collection of various maps all over the world of where all these labyrinths are found.
Well, it's certainly one area, one place that would probably jump on this is Australia, and
Yeah.
Australia, Tasmania, New Zealand, 'cause they have so much going on down there, and that to me would be an obvious segue in that direction. And there's certainly a good sized community who are very involved with the labyrinth scene down there. So I bet they would be the ones to, if they're not already doing it now, they'll have something going on. I haven't gone on their website recently, so but I could see it coming from there uh,
Yep.
pretty quickly. That would make sense to me. Um, okay, so I'm going to talk. Let's talk a little bit specifically more about the anniversary gathering map, and about these sub maps, because boy, it's already 1:46, but I don't see, there's no one else on here, so we can go until 2, because there's no one waiting to ask questions or anything. So at least I don't see anybody even um, chatting or anything. Let's see. Yeah, no. Okay, so when you look at the map, and this is for any, but you have the main map that takes up a little north of Milwaukee on the west side of Lake Michigan, and goes west to past, let's see, Janesville, and
Yeah,
um,
down to the Indiana with Illinois border, pretty much.
down to the Indiana, Illinois. And so then you have a click here for Madison area map, a click here for Milwaukee area map, and then a big, huge click here for the Chicago area map. So as you said before, this is because in the Madison area and in the Milwaukee area, there are significant numbers of labyrinths there that people might. You know what else is that I love about this is that even though you don't show a walking map tour or anything like that, people can do this themselves just by
Yes.
clicking on these maps and going closer. If I click on the Madison map, it brings up, wow, all around the lakes there. There
Mhm.
are lakes, Lake Mendota, and another lake, Wabessa. Oh boy, I'm mutilating the name here because it's kind of small for
'Cause
my eyesight. But all around Westport, Madison, Middleton, Westport, there's a bunch of them, and
mhm.
so you have here, so when you go into this submap, you have a little green window that says click here for road trips and articles about labyrinths in Madison, Wisconsin. So, people can really plan their trips in detail by these sub maps. If they go into the main map and then click on the sub maps,
Mhm.
and really decide, okay, we're going to take a day and we're going to check out this one and this one and this one. And there's a couple that have the red and orange star, which indicates a especially uh, valuable one in terms of some distinction. It has some
Yeah.
distinction that makes it a special one. Um, so this is so what you're getting here. You're getting a lot of bang for your buck when you take these. Now, can people print out the map so that they have it so that they can use it in their car like a regular map if they want to, or can they download it to their uh, um, phones or smartphones?
They can see it on if they, with a tablet or smartphone that
Okay.
has a web connection, they could see it on there.
Okay.
You could print off a screenshot. I think the
Okay.
better use for me is to go in and pick the labyrinths or the sites you want to see,
Yeah.
and then use the links to find out the addresses of that.
Yeah.
That's how I use it, and then plug those addresses into your navigation device in your car or in your smartphone or whatever,
Okay.
and you create the route you want to create, and you're able to determine that by looking at the map and figuring out generally where each of those labyrinths are, so that you can design your own loop or just an out and back to one labyrinth or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, the whole idea of this really came from the work John Ritter of Paxworks and I did, designing a similar map for the TLS gathering back in 2015. And we had a little bit bigger radius of the map, but Chicagoland is so dense with labyrinths.
Mm-hmm.
I think in talking with labyrinth gathering leaders, we decided to contain that a little bit. But one of the things you will notice with the map is that it is sort of embedded, if you will, in the larger mapping program.
Mm-hmm.
So that from the TLS specific map that we created, you can click out to go to other states, so that if you're perhaps commuting and creating a kind of pilgrimage to the Labyrinth gathering in Chicago area, and you're coming from 4 or 5 states away, you could use the map to actually look at each state and look at the route you're taking through the state and figuring out where you'd like to stop along that route as well, because it's designed so that it becomes sort of a part of the larger project,
Yeah.
if you will.
Yeah, yeah, I can see when I go. So there are submaps within submaps. So if you click on the Chicagoland red area from the main map, what you get is not only now the first level of submap, But then on this one, you have two more red squares or
Mhm.
rectangle squares to go into that are even that get you in even closer because the density. And then
Mhm.
you have another little window. And Woodstock, you've done this for Woodstock, Illinois, because that's where the gathering this year is going to be held at the Loyola Eco Center Conference Center in Woodstock. So you have for additional attractions in Woodstock, Illinois, click here. So it's not just what you're doing here is not only helping people create pilgrimages, which is wonderful. And I'm really thinking that that's what I'm going to do. I'm really seriously considering driving from Dallas because one of the places I love to visit is New Harmony, Indiana. So if somehow I can segue either before or after on my way home that way, that's what I'm planning on doing. But this is helpful for people, and they also can see what else is available in the area where they're going to be staying, that they might want to go to. Lots of times people come to these gatherings and it's just one partner who's really focused on labyrinths. The other one is likes to walk them occasionally and is happy to support their partner, but they'd like to go off and see other things too, and have other things to. So it's wonderful that you also have those little windows and more information about other things that are available in the areas. For instance, I click on Naperville, and well, this one doesn't have.
If
Um,
you go, yeah, if you go to the Chicagoland,
yeah,
Greater Chicago, Illinois, you'll
that
find that link to Naperville.
yeah, and then for additional attractions in Chicago, click here. So it's sort of a 360 degree information virtual map that a lot. I mean, people tend to just go on the Google but if you're focusing on the labyrinths and you do want to do a pilgrimage or even a day trip or a half a day trip, you have a block of time. This it's very helpful. Um,
So, so Christiana, another thing to know here also for navigational purposes here, which map are you on
I
right
am
now?
now in the downtown Chicago, Illinois
Okay.
area map.
Um, I think the only place I didn't put this, and it's intentional, was on the actual TLS initial map. But on this downtown Chicago, as on the greater Chicago and things, do you see up at the top the word welcome?
Yes.
Okay, so if you hover your cursor over that, there's going to be three options.
Okay.
The bottom one is Well-Fed Spirit Labyrinth Map.
Uh-huh.
If you click on that,
Okay.
it will take you out to the opening intro page to the Labyrinth map,
Okay.
at which point you can click on the Canadian thumbnail or the United States thumbnail and move back into any state or area that you want to look at.
Great, great. Yeah, so this gets you back to, so if I don't know about you, but when I do these kind of subpages and subpages and subpages, sometimes you get so buried, you lose track of, wait a minute, what's the
Yeah.
big picture here? What do I really want to know? I want to know how do I get from my house to Woodstock, Illinois, or Chicago, or which direction, what's the map, what's the driving map, and is there any labyrinths on that thing? So this is great. So and this welcome is at all the tops of all the subdivisions, correct? All of the
Yeah.
submaps have that at the top.
All of them except for the initial Labyrinth Society gathering
Oh,
map,
okay.
which I left it off there intentionally because I felt like it distracted from the real intents and purposes of the TLS base map page.
Okay.
But um, you will see on the bottom of that page, though, that there are links to move to the wider US map and the wider Canadian map, but they're just kind
Yep.
of down there and not real obvious.
Right.
The other thing that's maybe helpful for folks to know is when you click on one of those dot links to either a Google Map view of that labyrinth or the pink dot to additional information, those all are intentionally designed to not simply go from this site over to that link, but to pull up a brand new page
Mm-hmm.
so that you don't end up burying yourself like you were talking about.
Yeah.
that you always have that window open to that map page.
Yes, yes, I just did that, and that is absolutely the case. And I did check that before, a couple weeks ago, or when you first presented this. Yes, so, and that is something that is in terms of how we work on the Labyrinth Society and create informational pages and things. We always make sure we open up another window because people want to be able to get back to the page that they were working on before. So yes, that's great, Warren. Thank you so much for doing that, for making sure that there's that ability. And then of course on every single page it looks like you have a link to the Worldwide Labyrinth Locator. So just in
Yep.
case, you can always go back out there too. So this is to me very thorough. And I'm sure that nowadays there's other technology that other map people are using. That's a very different way of approaching it. But I think this is makes a lot of sense. It provides tremendous amount of information, and is a great service to uh, not only the people who are going to end up coming to the Labyrinth Society, but anybody visiting from anywhere, either if out of state or residents of the U.S., citizens or non, visitors from other countries. It's just a real good resource. So I think it's a terrific, and I think, do you have this listed as a resource on the Labyrinth Society somewhere in the Labyrinth? Do you have
I
your maps listed
Yeah.
anywhere?
Okay. I don't know on the TLS site. I'm not sure. I would
Okay.
welcome that. Again, that's one of those things that in my mind that would be up to TLS to
Yeah.
decide they wanted that linked,
Okay.
and I'm gracious for that to either happen or not happen.
Okay.
And understand reasons on both sides of that issue. So I think it's, for other people's work, even though I'm a part of TLS, for TLS specific work, if you want to link it, that's wonderful. And if you don't, cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that again, TLS's mission is to provide support for labyrinth endeavors all over the world, all different kinds. So, I don't. I think it's in alignment with that mission. But I'm just talking extemporaneously here. It seems to make sense to list it somewhere, and we certainly do have listings like we have for the Australian newsletter on the website. So it's just another something to think about, and perhaps provide. Um, and so I want to get back to, so let's get back into the conversation here about you talked about it being a contemplative practice. You talked about it being, so, and I know that this is important, that it's important for you to provide services for healing and and meditation, and it's one of the reasons why you also walk labyrinths and build them, and so um, do you ever I don't know how to say this. So
Just saying.
when you're in this space of creating this,
Uh-huh.
and working on these, is it what are some of the experience that you've had with this? I mean, have you had any times when there's been an out of body or otherworldly kind of like, oh wow, this is here, or this is there, or this is synchronistic to that this has happened, because you're doing labyrinth work, and I don't care what kind of labyrinth work you're doing, there's always that element of synchronicity, that energy of of bringing together disparate things to make a whole. And so I was wondering if you have had that experience, either doing this or photographing at the gatherings, and if you'd like to share anything like that, anything, if you've had anything like that happen.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot. It tends to not be the heavens opening and the angels descending kind of thing. But it's about noticing, noticing and giving yourself to the thin places, if you will, um, and noticing that it's often the small thing that has just incredible potential for us. Um, I'm often not successful at such, but I believe that any endeavor or experience we take on or participate in can become more empowering for us if we approach it as a contemplative practice. So, for instance, when I'm creating these maps, when I'm doing this kind of mundane work of creating these maps on a computer, um, I treat it sort of like a meandering exercise in a real mindful way. And it leads me to really unexpected places and new discoveries sometimes. Like I said, I discover something I didn't know before. And with each labyrinth I list, I try to be intentional about considering the people who made that resource possible. I lift up the creators and the users of those labyrinths to the light and consider the blessings that have maybe come their way as a result of that work and practice. I just think that in a world in such great need, the stewards of these labyrinths, the folks who've created them and who tend to them, who quietly work and occasionally ruffle feathers and prod systems to move forward, all to create spaces wherein people are empowered and nurtured and find healing, when there are so many other things in the world that would seek to do the opposite. It's helpful for me as I'm doing this mundane work to be mindful of those folks, and that's transformative for me. It gets me out of the Facebook cycle of only seeing the bad stuff, and realizing that there's really, really good work out there. And then when I'm walking labyrinths, like anybody, we occasionally have mixed in with a whole lot of ordinariness. We occasionally have these kind of amazing experiences where it causes you to pause and go, what was that about? And begin a process that may not come up with any answer, but has you asking some really great questions.
I hear you, and in light of that, you play the American flute, the Native American flute, and you're pretty good at it. I've listened to you many times, and you make beautiful music with him. I'm sure that these kinds of experience has occurred. Can you share with our listeners some experiences you've had playing on the labyrinth? You sent a couple of pictures of you actually standing on the labyrinth and playing your flute, but I'm sure you've also played for labyrinth events too in your area at different times, and also at gatherings. So, what is that like in terms of that liminality, that access to something greater than ourselves when you're doing that there?
Okay. I think first and foremost, it's helpful to know that I played Native American style flute, if you will. To my knowledge, there is no indigenous First Nations or Native American blood in my family line. And I want to be especially respectful to not wrongly appropriate other people's culture. So it was only after a long kind of journey under the mentorship of some significant indigenous flute players that I came to a place of understanding and acceptance to be comfortable using the flute. But I also want to be clear that I'm not Native American and have some humility there. But for me, I always sort of approach those experiences of being invited to play or playing for a group with some trepidation. I don't consider myself an accomplished musician, and when I hear that word, I sort of think of folks like Judith Tripp, who's a member of Veritas Council and has played her flutes in the Chartres Cathedral and has CDs, and her music is just amazing. For me, and probably I think Judith too would say this, my flute playing is really not mine to claim, but it's a gift from other cultures, and it becomes a sort of practice of prayer. the musician Dan Fogelberg once included a phrase by the Bengali poet Rabindranath Tagore, I think is his name, in one of his songs, and the phrase is translated, "God respects me when I work, but loves me when I sing." And it's this notion that, we've all got this great work to do, but for me, what playing the flute does is brings me into a way of relating intimately with the divine, with spirit in this world. And so when I'm playing for a group or playing in a space, I'm always trying to kind of keep the humility present and realize that this is not about me. This is about making room for spirit in the world, in my life and in the lives of those who may hear this music. And I remember one time, a picture from Santa Fe where I'm standing on the Labyrinth. John Ritter and I went up to Museum Hill in Santa Fe, and he told me about this labyrinth and that there was sort of an echo in the middle of it. So I sort of knew about that, but still I had not fully anticipated the energy of playing in a space that not only amplified and reverberated the music that one offered, but also gave it back to the musician as a gift. And it was just this amazing experience.
Wow.
So there's lots of those kinds of stories. And I think we just have to approach every occasion in which we find ourselves, but especially when we're doing the Labyrinth stuff, as a place where the veil between the worlds sort of gets really thin, and our job is to be open and to watch, in the smallest things going on about what's at play in that place.
Yeah, but and don't you think that the gift that you bring to the experience, whether you're there by yourself, that's one type of experience, or there are other people walking as you're playing, which is a different type of experience. But that the energy doesn't stop with you playing that flute. It flows outward and provides something for anyone who's walking at that time too. It's
Yeah.
it's a definite, just like when people play music, even if it's CDs or from a list on their iPad, it as Lauren said years ago, the music helps shift you from the logical to the intuitive. It helps shift. It provides a space that wasn't there before. So,
and I think that's really, in these kind of settings, that's the work of the musician, to come to that place and to offer what they're offering in a way so that the music doesn't stop with them. I'll tell you, I've been in places where the musician's ego put the wall up and the music stopped. And so I think the person who receives the music has some work to do in order to receive it. But I think the musicians also are responsible for making sure that they are offering this in a way so that they don't get in the way of its ongoing expansion of energy out into the lives of people. And that's true with any of the work we do. We can facilitate our abilities so that they empower other people, or it can be all about us and it shuts it down really fast.
Yeah, I agree. And I have, for those of live musicians that I have invited to work with me in the Labyrinth events that I've done, I've often said, I pretty much always say to them, let the Labyrinth take you where it wants to go. Don't, you can have suggestions in your mind about what you want to play, but allow the Labyrinth to sort of lead the way and just see where it takes you.
Yeah.
I think you will have a better experience. You will enjoy it better. And 9 times out of 10, I've had them come to me and say, "Oh my God, that was incredible playing for the Labyrinth. It was incredible playing on it over
Yeah.
and over and over again." And
Well, as a matter of fact, on Well-Fed Spirit's Labyrinth page, where the Labyrinth resources are,
yeah,
one of the gifts you will find there is some recorded music. I had a couple of really kind of professional level musicians that I'm in a flute circle with came to a longest night Labyrinth walk one December, and they set up and they were going to play Native American flute and stringed instruments and some vocables improvisationally and play off the energy and the activity of what was happening in the space. And they recorded it with their professional recording equipment live. What resulted was a song cycle of music, improvisational but just amazingly powerful instrumental music that they then gave to me after they mixed it down and said, here, put it on your website and just let people have it. And so you can download that song cycle from a longest night walk that provides over an hour of instrumental music that folks could take and use at their own Labyrinth walks if they wanted to. But it's just there to freely have as a gift from the musicians.
so this is on wellfedspirit.org/labyrinths.
Yeah, and then if you
And
click on the spiritual practices link
okay,
and then
spiritual
go down
practice.
the list, and you will see a link for Labyrinths, and that's short. Any of those practices listed there is whatever it is as a spiritual practice, and you go to that page, and it's a page full of links um, to resources that are there just to be had.
Okay.
And one of the resources there is I can't remember what it is exactly, music or um, I can look real quickly because I can get there real fast. Um, so at the very bottom of the first left column, you will see, let's see. Oh, no. The top of the second column, just below the little kind of short explanation, you will see a link that says music to download for walks free.
Okay.
And if you click on that, that takes you to a page that talks about the event in which this was recorded. And then over on the left side are the tracks that you can right click and then download the linked file of each of those tracks.
Okay, great. Thank you, Warren. That's a wonderful thing to know, and I'm really looking forward to listening to it. That's a great resource. So what are you gonna what are you up to? What do you do? This is my last question, and we're already over time, but I got to know. So, in terms of Labyrinth projects and activities, anything specific on the horizon? I know you're going to be at the gathering, of course,
Yep,
right?
try to be there, sure.
Yeah.
Um, I I try to, I've got a job to do, a vocation, and it gives me passion to do that. But it keeps me busy, and mostly I try to be open to whatever's going to be, and to be mindful to find small ways to help others become newly acquainted with labyrinths, as well as facilitate a deepening of the way people who are already using labyrinths can grow in that use. I keep working at the map. I keep trying to introduce labyrinths to children, which is sort of my subversive way of creating it a normative movement of labyrinths in the world by helping children get introduced to it, because they'll grow up and they'll go, oh yeah, that was something I used when I was a kid. Um, and so for things like that, that's pretty much how I keep busy. I try to get out and take my camera with me as often as possible, and then that stuff shows up on either on Facebook, those photos show up on Facebook, or on my Flickr photo account site. Um, and then I just try to be a good partner to my wife and a good dad to my kid, my son, who turns 21 in a couple days. So
Oh my golly! Wow,
uh,
that's a big transition.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and those really for me, those last two are actually probably the most important thing.
Yeah.
That if I'm being the kind of partner that I need to be and want to be and should be, and being the kind of dad, that's what matters. So that's really kind of what I'm going to be doing.
Oh, thanks, Warren. We're over time, but it's been such a pleasure sharing this hour with you, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, you're sure welcome. Thank you.
And many continued blessings on your path. And so looking forward to seeing you in October, Columbus weekend. And I hope it should be leaf peeper season, right, in that neck of the woods. It should be.
Oh,
I hope
hopefully.
so. Hope
Yeah,
hope to see some nice. You don't see that much in the Dallas area.
there
So
you go.
so thank you so much for joining me, and have a wonderful summer.
Thanks. I'll see you on the path, Christiana.
Okay, Warren. So you've been listening to the Labyrinth Society's Many Paths, Many Visions on GoToMeeting and broadcast by Spreaker with your host, Christiana Britton. Be sure to check the Labyrinth Society website media area, their Facebook page, and the global group, YouTube and Google Plus for a list of upcoming dates and guests. Also, if this podcast has piqued your interest in the Labyrinth Society and you'd like more information about membership, please go to www.labyrinthsociety.org/membership. So have a wonderful summer, everyone. Ciao, namaste, and may you find what you need on your path through life.